If you're into haunted house horror stories, get ready. In this video, each story reveals the kind of presence no one wants to share a roof with, like the one you're about to hear, where a couple tries to stand their ground against a dark force that turns their bedroom into an invisible battleground. But before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Something grabbed my foot that night. It wasn't a dream, it wasn't my imagination. It was a hand, a cold hand, with fingers that coiled around my ankle like a snake and pulled with a force that made me scream into the darkness. I bolted upright in bed, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. Emma slept beside me, completely still, as if nothing had happened. But I knew. Someone, or something, was there with us. We had just moved into her house, one of those old wooden houses that seemed to breathe. Have you ever walked into a place and felt like the walls were watching you? That's what it was like. From the first day, I had the feeling that the house didn't like my presence. Things would disappear, keys, my phone, even a cup of coffee I had just set on the table. And they always reappeared in absurd places. Once I found my keys inside the fridge. Another time they were in the bathroom cabinet, on top of a stack of clean towels. Emma thought I was just forgetful, but I knew it was more than that. On the second night, after that hand grabbed my foot, I started noticing other things. The room would suddenly turn ice cold, even in the heat of summer. And it wasn't a normal cold. It was that chill that comes from within, as if your blood had turned to ice water. I would wake up in the middle of the night certain that someone was in the corner of the room, just standing there, watching. But when I turned my head, there was nothing. Just emptiness and that heavy silence, as if the house itself was holding its breath. One time I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom when I saw, in the mirror's reflection, a tall, thin shadow behind me. It was taller than me, with narrow shoulders, as if it had been stretched in the dark. I froze. My whole body screamed at me not to look, but I turned around. Nothing. Just emptiness and the bathroom light, which suddenly seemed too dim. Emma started feeling it too. She would wake up startled, saying she had heard footsteps in the hallway or someone whispering her name. We started praying before bed, asking for protection, but it seemed the more we prayed, the worse it got. The prayers weren't working. In fact, it felt like they were provoking something. And then came the first episode of sleep paralysis. I woke up in the middle of the night unable to move. My eyes were open, but my body was stone. And in the corner of the room, where there had only been darkness before, there was a blot, a black thing, darker than the rest, that didn't move. It just stood there as if it were studying me. I tried to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. And then I felt it, a weight on my chest, as if someone were sitting on me. I couldn't breathe. The fingers of that invisible thing tightened around my neck, and I felt a cold breath in my ear. It was a whisper, but not in words. It was just pure hatred. That's when Emma woke up and started screaming. She said my mouth was moving, but it wasn't my voice coming out. It was other voices, rough and guttural, as if they had come from a place not of this world. The house was alive, and it didn't want us there. After that night, nothing was the same. The sleep paralysis became routine, and every time I woke up paralyzed, the dark blot was there, closer. This time, it didn't stay in the corner. It crept slowly, like thick smoke, to the edge of the bed. And the cold. God, the cold was otherworldly. We started sleeping with thick blankets even in summer, but it didn't help. The ice came from within, as if the very air was filled with needles. Emma started recording videos at night, hoping to capture something, and she did. In one of them, you could clearly see a figure passing through the hallway, stopping at the bedroom door as if watching us. But the worst were the orbs, balls of light that appeared out of nowhere, floating around the room before disappearing into the wall. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't deny it. The house was full of things that weren't from this world. One night, I woke up with the feeling that something was breathing in my ear. Slowly, I turned my head and nearly died of terror. The dark blot was no longer in the corner. It was above me, bent over, as if it wanted to look at me closely. I smelled decay, old rotting flesh. And then, it whispered. There were no words, just a noise, but I understood. It wanted us to leave. The next day, things got worse. The doors started slamming on their own, and once the TV turned on in the middle of the night with a deafening static, as if all the channels were tuned to hell. Emma, who had always been skeptical, started to get truly scared. She confessed that she heard voices when I wasn't home, whispers in languages she didn't know, calling her name. The last straw was when the darkness swallowed the room. It was just an ordinary night. We were lying down when suddenly all the lights went out, not like a normal blackout, but as if someone had sucked the light away. The room turned pitch black in a way that wasn't natural, a black that seemed alive. And in the middle of that, we heard it. A laugh, low, rough, coming from all directions at once. That's when I screamed Jesus' name. It wasn't a plea, it was a battle cry. And suddenly the darkness recoiled as if it had been struck. The lights came back on, but the room was still freezing, and the blot was still there. But now, it seemed furious. We knew we couldn't stay any longer. But would we make it out before it decided to take us for good? The decision was made. We were leaving the next day. But the house knew, and it wasn't going to let us leave in peace. That last night, the air grew heavy even before dark. It felt like the walls were closing in around us, suffocating us. Emma packed our bags with trembling hands, and I saw the fear in her eyes every time a door creaked or a strange noise came from the basement. We didn't even talk about what was happening anymore. We just wanted to get out. But night fell, and with it the final nightmare. We lay down exhausted, but I knew I wouldn't sleep. The room was colder than ever, and our breath formed white clouds in the air, as if we were in the middle of winter. That's when the voices started. They weren't whispers this time, they were screams. Rough, angry screams coming from every corner at once. Emma grabbed my arm tightly, and I felt her nails digging into my skin. Then, the darkness returned. This time, it wasn't gradual. It was as if someone had thrown a bucket of black paint over us. I couldn't see anything, not even Emma beside me. I could only hear her rapid breathing and something else. Something dragging across the floor, coming toward us. I tried to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. It was as if an invisible hand was covering my mouth. And then, I felt it. They were in the room. It wasn't just the dark blot. There were many things, many presences moving in the darkness. One of them passed so close to me that I felt the cold of death on my skin. That's when Emma started to cry. It wasn't a normal cry. It was a wrong cry, as if it wasn't her. And then her voice changed. It became thick, distorted, and she said something in a language I had never heard, but it made my blood run cold. I didn't think twice. I grabbed her tightly and started praying out loud, not with fear, but with hatred. Hatred for that house, for that thing that wanted us dead. And suddenly a flash, not of light, but as if the air itself had trembled. The darkness dissolved for a second, and I saw. They were all there. Thin figures, pale, with eyes that didn't reflect light. And among them, the dark blot, now with a form, now with a face that looked at me with a smile that wasn't human. I screamed Jesus' name again, this time with all the strength I had. And then, silence. The darkness was gone. The voices stopped. The room was empty, just us trembling, with our hearts pounding so hard it hurt. The blot was gone. The next day we left that house and never returned. We never found out what it was, and we don't want to know. Sometimes I still dream of that smile in the dark, and I know it's still waiting. But not for us. Creepy, right? What did you think of that story? On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. After everything they went through in that house, one thing's clear. Sometimes prayers just aren't enough. Like in the next story, where an entire family finds out that some houses don't just hold old walls. They hide secrets that refuse to stay buried. The first time I set foot in that house, it felt like the air had turned to ice. It wasn't just the wind. It was something more. Something lurking in the corners, in the shadows, waiting. We moved in because the price was right, the space was big, and the realtor swore it was a steal. But when my mom jokingly asked if the house was haunted, his smile froze. "Well, every old house has its stories," he said, wiping his brow. We laughed, but that moment stuck with me. The move was smooth at first, but the first night brought the first sign. I was sure I had turned off all the lights before bed, but I woke up at 3 a.m. to find the whole house lit up. Even the basement, which we never used, had its light on. My brother tried to play the skeptic. Must be a wiring issue. But I saw the way he looked at the stairs, as if expecting someone to come down. The welcome party was when things started to get truly strange. We invited neighbors, friends, even some relatives from out of town. That's when old Mr. Thompson from next door showed up uninvited. He didn't greet anyone, he just stood in the corner of the room, staring at the wall as if he saw something. When I approached to offer him a glass of juice, he grabbed my arm with a strength that didn't match his age and whispered, "You shouldn't have bought this house." Then he left without another word, leaving that heavy silence in the air. That same night, my brother started sleepwalking. I woke up to the sound of dragging footsteps in the hallway and went to check. He was standing in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at his own reflection. Except it wasn't him. The expression on his face was different, older, crueler. When I screamed his name, he turned slowly and said, in a voice that seemed to come from far away, "She doesn't like intruders." The next day, he swore he didn't remember a thing. But the real terror began when we discovered what had happened in that house before we arrived. Mrs. Baker, the gossipy neighbor, couldn't resist and spilled the story. 2 women had died there. The first, in the 1950s, hanged herself in my bedroom. The second? Well, no one knows for sure. They say her husband disappeared too, and the case was never solved. And it was in my room that things became unbearable. Every night, I woke up feeling like someone was sitting on my bed watching me. The dreams were always the same. Me trying to escape the house, but the doors wouldn't open. The windows were locked, and someone, was pulling me back, whispering things I couldn't understand. I would wake up screaming, my chest hurting as if I had been running for hours. My younger sister started suffering too. High fevers with no explanation. Nightmares so intense they would wake up crying. The doctors found nothing wrong in the tests, but I knew. The house didn't want us there. The worst came that night when we were all in the living room watching TV. Suddenly, the glasses on the table started shaking. The vase of flowers flew on its own and shattered against the wall. Everyone was paralyzed, and in that silence I heard, clear as if someone were right beside me, a breath freezing my ear. That's when we understood. This house was never ours. Someone or something still lived here. And if we didn't leave soon, it was going to make us disappear too. After that night in the living room, we couldn't pretend everything was fine anymore. My mom, who had always been the skeptic of the family, was the first to say what everyone was thinking. We have to get out of here. But the house didn't want to let us go. The next morning, the doors started locking themselves. We tried to leave, and the latch would turn with a macabre click, as if invisible hands were holding us back. My brother, who had always been the bravest, tried to break down the front door, and was thrown back as if he had been punched in the chest. He turned pale, breathless, and I saw fear in his eyes for the first time in his life. That's when the voices started. Whispers in the empty hallways, muffled laughter behind the walls. Sometimes it was as if someone was calling my name, but when I turned, no one was there. My youngest sister swore she saw a woman in a white dress standing at the top of the stairs, but when we looked, she was gone. The last straw was what happened to me in the basement. I went down to get a toolbox, and the door slammed behind me. The light went out. In the dark, I felt something brushing its fingers against my arm. Cold, thin hands, like bones covered in skin. I screamed, tried to run, but something grabbed my ankle. I fell to the floor, and in that second I saw her. A pale woman with dark, sunken eyes, smiling with a mouth full of sharp teeth. I don't know how I managed to get out of there. I only remember running up the stairs screaming, my breath scratching my throat. When I reached the top, my family was gathered, scared. My mom looked at me and said, with a calm that was scarier than any scream, "Tomorrow, we're leaving, no matter what happens." That night, the house came alive. The walls creaked, things fell on their own, and the wind howled even with all the windows closed. My brother had another sleepwalking episode, but this time, he didn't wake up when we called him. He stood in the middle of the hallway, looking at something only he could see until he fell to the floor, convulsing. That was enough. The next day, we packed what we could and fled. We didn't even look back. Years later, I heard the house was demolished. They say the new owner, a guy who didn't believe in ghost nonsense, had a heart attack there. He died before the ambulance arrived. To this day, I dream about that house. And worse, sometimes when I'm alone in the dark, I still feel that same cold and hear someone whispering my name, because some doors once opened never truly close. Terrifying, huh? Not everyone walks out of a place like that unharmed, and sometimes what we take with us is heavier than it seems. Like in the next story, where a disturbing presence follows a brother back home. What starts as a family reunion quickly turns into a full-blown spiritual nightmare. The musty smell from the basement crept up into the hallway that night, even with the door shut. I was on the couch trying to ignore the tightness in my chest that had been there ever since my brother Daniel came back home. He had arrived a week earlier, after being away for 2 years. Trouble with the law, debts, things the family didn't talk about loudly. But it wasn't just that. Something about him was off. My younger sister Lucy sat beside me, rubbing her arms as if she were cold. "You feel it too, don't you?" she whispered. I just nodded. We had always been sensitive to these things, energies, vibrations, whatever you want to call them. The house we grew up in had its stories, but nothing like what started happening after Daniel returned. He stayed in his room all day, barely spoke, and when he did appear, it was as if the air grew heavy. Even the dog, an old mutt who loved everyone, growled at him. One afternoon, I caught Daniel staring at the basement, the door slightly ajar. "What are you looking at?" I asked, and he turned to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "There's something down there," he said. My throat went dry instantly. That night, I woke up to a noise, a slow dragging of feet on the basement stairs. I got up, thinking it was Daniel, until I saw him standing at the top of the stairs, his back to me. "Daniel?" I called softly. He didn't react. He just stood there, motionless, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Then suddenly, the hallway light flickered, and when it came back on, he was gone. My legs trembled. I could have sworn I saw him, but it didn't make sense. His room was upstairs and the door was closed. I decided it had been just a dream until the next day when Lucy came running from the kitchen, pale. "I heard someone screaming in the basement," she said, her voice breaking. It was Daniel's voice, but it wasn't him. We spent hours avoiding even looking in the direction of that door, until, eventually, Lucy let out a scream. She was staring down the hallway, her eyes filled with tears. "There was someone there," she cried. "It looked like Daniel, but all wrong." I didn't see anything, but her fear was real. Something was in that house, something that had come with my brother. Or worse, something that had become him. That night I grabbed a bundle of sage my grandmother had given me years ago and started lighting it, praying softly. I didn't know if it would help, but one thing was certain. The Daniel who had come back home was not the same one who had left. And if we didn't do something soon, maybe we wouldn't come out of this hole either. The sage smoke rose in spirals, mixing with the damp earth smell from the basement. I passed the bundle over the doors, the corners, repeating the words my grandmother had taught me. Words of protection, of banishing what didn't belong. Lucy was behind me, holding a crucifix, as if it were the only thing keeping her from falling apart. The whole house seemed to hold its breath. That's when the hallway light flickered again. This time there was no denying it. Someone was down there. A creak came from the stairs, slow, as if each step groaned under a weight that shouldn't exist. My heart was beating so hard I could barely hear the whisper. "You should have left him there." The voice was Daniel's, but distorted, as if dragged through something dirty and old. Lucy grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Is he in the basement?" she whimpered. But I knew it wasn't just him, not only him. We went down the stairs with a flashlight, the light trembling in my hand. The basement was freezing, much colder than it should have been on a summer night. The walls had that dampness that always seemed to stick to your skin, but now it came with something more, a heavy energy, as if the air were full of invisible things moving. Then the flashlight illuminated something in the far corner. Daniel was there, but not just him. He was kneeling, facing the wall, his shoulders rising and falling as if he were crying. But the sound coming from him wasn't crying. It was a low, rough laugh that didn't match his voice. And behind him, the shadow on the wall didn't match his body. It was larger, wider, as if something were clinging to his back, feeding. "Daniel," I called, but my voice came out in a breath. He turned his face slowly, and it was worse than if he had screamed. His eyes were wrong, too black as if covered by a thick layer of oil. His mouth opened, but what came out wasn't his voice. "He belongs to us now." Lucy let out a scream and ran up the stairs. I stood paralyzed, the flashlight falling to the floor, the light going out. In the dark, I heard Daniel standing up, his steps coming toward me. But there were too many steps, as if more legs were dragging along with him. It was the smell that made me react, that odor of rotten flesh, of something old and decaying. I ran as if hell itself were behind me, and maybe it was. When I reached the top of the stairs, I slammed the basement door shut and leaned against it, as if that could hold back whatever was down there. Lucy was curled up on the couch, trembling. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice failing. I looked at the basement door, where something on the other side scratched the wood slowly, as if it knew we had nowhere to run. "Call someone who knows how to handle this," I replied. But deep down, I knew. Some things, once they enter your life, don't leave so easily. And whatever had come back with Daniel, it had no intention of leaving. I called Father Mendoza the next day. He was an old man, the kind who looks at you and seems to know things no one else does. When he entered the house, he made a face, as if he had stepped on something rotten. "There's a heavy energy here," he said, gripping his rosary tightly. "Something came with your brother, and it's not human." We took him to the basement. The door was still closed, but you could feel it. That thing was there, waiting. The priest began praying in Latin, sprinkling holy water in the corners. And that's when things got worse. The light started flickering wildly. Something pounded on the door from the inside, thud, 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 as if testing the wood. Then Daniel's voice came, distorted, screaming, "Get me out of here!" But the next second, another voice mixed with his, deeper, older, and whispered, "He is ours." Lucy started crying, but the priest didn't stop. He shouted the words louder, rubbing the crucifix against the basement door. Then there was silence, a silence so heavy it hurt the ears. The door opened by itself. Down there, Daniel was lying on the floor, pale as a corpse, but himself again, his eyes normal, his breathing labored. He looked at us and said, his voice hoarse, I had a bad dream, but I knew it wasn't a dream." The priest closed the basement with a ritual, burning more sage, praying until his voice grew hoarse. He said that it was gone, but I saw the way he looked at Daniel before leaving, as if he knew some marks never fade. 2 weeks later, Daniel packed his bags. "I need to go," he said, not looking into my eyes. I didn't try to stop him. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night hearing footsteps in the hallway. Lucy swore she saw a shadow in the basement again, but we don't talk about it. Some things are better left quiet. Because what came with Daniel that summer? Did it really leave? Or is it just waiting for us to let our guard down? Scary stuff, right? When fear creeps into your home, it doesn't ask for permission. It settles in, little by little, filling every corner. Just like in the story you're about to hear, where the silence of quarantine begins to uncover sounds, shadows, and whispers no one can explain. But before we go on, if you've made it this far, that means you're enjoying these stories. So go ahead and hit that like button to let YouTube know you're into this kind of content. That way, you won't miss any more chilling stories." The whisper came so close to my ear that I could feel its chill trickling down my neck. That's how it all began. On our first night in that cursed house. We had just moved in, right in the middle of the pandemic, when our apartment rent became impossible to pay. I thought I had hit the jackpot when we found that huge house. 4 floors, a furnished basement, a spacious backyard, and cheap, really cheap. My fiancé, always the skeptic, said it was the deal of a lifetime. I should have been suspicious. But the urgency to leave our cramped apartment spoke louder. The first thing that weirded me out was the layout of the house. It was strange. The main bathroom had a window right in the shower. Yes, you heard that right. A window in the middle of the tiles, as if at some point someone thought it was normal to shower with a direct view of the backyard. Or worse, as if someone wanted to peek from outside. At the time I laughed, said it was bizarre, but hung up some thick curtains and that was that. Problem solved, right? Wrong. On that first night, I was alone in the bedroom, unpacking the last of the boxes, when I heard it. A whisper. It wasn't some vague noise. It was words, soft, glued to my right ear as if someone was pressed up against me. And the worst part? I felt the cold breath. My body reacted before my brain did. I ran to the garage, almost knocking over my fiancé on the way. He found me there, huddled in the corner, shaking. "You're as white as a sheet," he said, holding my shoulders. "Someone whispered in my ear," I stuttered. He looked at me as if I had gone crazy. "It was the wind, honey. This house is old. Probably has some weird drafts." I wanted to believe him, but deep down I knew. Wind doesn't talk. In the following days, small things started happening. Things we could ignore if we tried hard enough. The dog, for example. A golden retriever who had never been afraid of anything suddenly started growling at the main bathroom every night. He would stand in the hallway, fur on end, teeth bared, as if something was in there. And always in the direction of that cursed shower window. I started avoiding that bathroom, but I couldn't avoid the feeling that something, or someone, was watching me, especially when I went down to the basement. That place was different, furnished, as if someone had lived there, and every time I was down there alone, the door would close. No wind, no explanation. Just bang, and I was locked in until I could push the door open with all my might. One night I woke up with my body heavy, impossible to move. It was my first time experiencing sleep paralysis, and worse, I saw something in the corner of the room. A dark, thin figure just watching. When I finally managed to scream, it vanished. My fiancé started having his own problems. He worked in the office on the 3rd floor, and one afternoon he came running down the stairs, pale. "Someone came into the office," he said, his voice choked. I saw it. The door opened, I heard footsteps, and when you turned, someone pulled my chair hard, so hard I almost fell. We looked at each other, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes, and then the noises started. Bangs on the walls coming from the attic, footsteps in the hallway at night, the dogs refusing to go into the backyard after sunset, as if something out there was waiting for them. The energy of the house changed. It became heavy, negative. It was as if the house was waking up, and I knew deep in my heart that something was watching us, something that didn't want us there. That's when the house started to breathe. After that night in the office, my fiancé stopped doubting. We started sleeping with the hallway light on, the dogs glued to the bed, as if they too felt that something was wrong. But nothing prepared us for what came next. One night, I woke up to the sound of scratching coming from the wall. It wasn't just any noise, it was deliberate. Someone or something was dragging their nails through the drywall slowly, as if they wanted us to hear. My fiancé jumped out of bed and faced the wall, fists clenched. "Who's doing that?" he shouted, defiant. The scratching stopped, and then 3 knocks. Clear as day, knock, knock, knock. We froze. Everyone knows what 3 knocks mean. The dogs started howling, something they had never done before. That's when I realized the house wasn't just haunted, it was alive. and it was angry. The next day, we decided to investigate the attic. We had never gone up there. The stairs were narrow, the door jammed, and there had always been a weird energy about that place. But we were desperate. When we opened the door, the smell hit us like a punch. Mold, of course, but also something sweet, sickly, like rotting meat. The dim light from our phones revealed an empty room, just some old boxes and a chair, a wooden chair in the middle of the attic facing the door, as if someone had been sitting there waiting. My fiancé swallowed hard. We're leaving, now. But the house wasn't going to let us go that easily. That night, I woke up to the sound of something dragging in the hallway, not footsteps, something heavy being pulled across the floor. When I looked through the crack in the door, I saw a shadow standing outside. Not a human figure. It was distorted. Taller than normal, arms too long, almost touching the floor. And then, the doorknob started to turn. I wasn't breathing. The dogs were huddled in the corner, staring at the door, teeth bared, but not making a single sound, as if they were too afraid to bark. The doorknob stopped. The shadow disappeared, but I knew it was still there, just waiting. The next day, I found marks on the hallway floor. Long scratches, as if someone had dragged their nails across the wood. That's when we decided, enough. We started packing everything in a hurry, not even looking back. But the house wasn't going to let us escape. Boxes fell on their own. The lights flickered. And once, I swear I saw a figure in the mirror behind me, smiling. On our last night there, the worst happened. We were almost asleep when we heard a scream coming from the basement. It wasn't human. It was something mimicking a scream. And then, laughter, soft, like children playing. My fiancé jumped out of bed and grabbed a baseball bat. We're leaving, now! We ran out, the dogs in the car, barely closing the door. We didn't look back. We spent the night in a cheap motel and the next day rented a tiny apartment. It didn't matter. For the first time in months, we could sleep. A few weeks later, we heard the house had been sold again. And according to the neighbors, the new family ran out after 2 weeks. To this day, I wonder, what did that house want from us? And worse, did we really escape? Because sometimes late at night, I still hear 3 knocks on my bedroom wall. Knock, knock, knock. What a nightmare. What did you think of that one? Give it a score from 0 to 10 and leave your thoughts down below. I first saw her on a Tuesday around 3 in the morning. I was coming back from the bathroom, half asleep, when something made me stop in the hallway. It was just a shadow, but it wasn't normal. It wasn't a cat. It wasn't a reflection. It wasn't anything you could explain with logic. It was tall, really tall, skinny like a pole, with arms that seemed too thin to be human. And it moved. I don't know, like it was made of thick smoke, swaying slowly, like a curtain blowing in the wind. I was paralyzed. My heart was beating so hard I swore you could hear it. Then, poof, it vanished. Not suddenly, no. It was like someone had pulled a curtain and it dissolved into the darkness. I took a deep breath, convinced myself it was just exhaustion, that the mind plays tricks when you're worn out. I went back to bed but didn't sleep anymore. The next day, with the sun coming through the window, everything seemed silly. Of course there was nothing there, I thought. New York is noisy, the building is old, the wiring is messed up. It must have been a play of shadows, who knows? I even mentioned it to my daughter, Sophie, over coffee. She laughed. Mom, you've been watching too many horror movies. We joked about it and forgot. But then the next night, there it was again. This time I was awake on purpose. I had left the bedroom door slightly open just to see if I was going crazy. And wouldn't you know it, that damn shadow appeared again? Same spot, same weird way of moving. This time I swear it stopped for a second like it was staring at me. Then it vanished again. A week passed. Then 2. Every single day, around 3 in the morning, the damn thing appeared. And you know what's worse? I started getting used to it. It's bizarre to say, but it's true. It became part of the routine, like hearing the distant train or the neighbor's dog barking. The difference was that I didn't tell anyone. What was the point? They'd call me crazy. Even Sophie noticed I was acting strange. "Mom, you've got dark circles under your eyes," she said. I just said I had insomnia. But one thing bothered me. Why always at 3 in the morning? I looked it up online. A classic mistake, I know. And it only got worse. Spiritual hour, when the veil is thinnest. A bunch of nonsense that made my stomach turn. I decided to ignore it. After all, the shadow never did anything. It just existed. Until one night, everything changed. I was almost asleep when I heard a noise in the hallway. It wasn't the building creaking, no. It was a step, slow, dragging. And the worst part? The shadow wasn't at the door. It was inside the apartment. I froze. The step came again, closer, a wet drag, like someone was barefoot on the floor after a shower. But there was no one there. Just the darkness and that cold feeling running down my spine. My bedroom door was slightly open, and I swear I saw the shadow pass through it. This time, it wasn't just a shadow at the apartment door. It was inside. I pulled the blanket up to my chin like a child afraid of the dark. My heart was beating so hard I thought it would explode. I took a deep breath and forced myself to think rationally. It's just the wind. It's just the old building creaking. It's just your mind playing tricks. But then I heard it again. Shh, shh. Like someone was dragging their feet down the hallway, stopping at Sophie's bedroom door. My blood turned to ice. I jumped out of bed before I could even think. If there was one thing I wouldn't tolerate, it was that thing near my daughter. I went into the hallway, trembling but ready to face whatever it was. The apartment was dark, but not empty. You could feel something there, like the air had gotten heavier. Sophie's bedroom door was closed. I pressed my ear against it, holding my breath. Nothing. I stood there, listening. No steps, no sign of that thing. Until... click. The kitchen light turned on by itself. I almost screamed. My instinct was to run and wake Sophie, pick her up and run out of the apartment. But I didn't. Because deep down there was still a part of me that refused to believe. Maybe it was a short circuit, I thought. Or the switch is messed up. I went to the kitchen slowly and turned off the light. My hand was sweating. That's when I looked back at the hallway. The shadow was there, still, denser than before, like it had materialized a bit more. This time I couldn't convince myself it was an illusion. It had contours, almost a human shape, just wrong. Too tall, too skinny, with arms that almost reached the floor. And even without eyes, I knew it was staring at me. The kitchen light turned on again. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I turned and ran to Sophie's room, slamming the door behind me. She woke up startled. "Mom, what's going on?" I didn't know what to say. How do you explain that there's something in the apartment that isn't human, that isn't normal? "It was just a nightmare, sweetheart," I lied. "Go back to sleep." But we both stayed awake until the sun came up, and the next day I started packing boxes to move out. The move was in 3 days, but I couldn't stand another night in that apartment. The boxes were still half packed when it got dark, and I was already on edge. Sophie noticed. "Mom, you're as white as a sheet," she said, holding my icy hand. I forced a smile. "It's just exhaustion, honey. Tomorrow we'll finish packing." But I knew there wouldn't be a tomorrow there. I decided we would sleep at my mom's house. We just needed to grab a few things and go. While Sophie packed her backpack, I went to the kitchen to get some snacks for the trip. That's when I heard it. Shh, shh. That same dragging of feet. But now it was coming from the hallway leading to the bedroom. My whole body froze. Sophie screamed. I ran like crazy. She was on the bedroom floor, pressed against the wall, her eyes wide with terror. "There was someone here," she screamed, pointing at the closet. "Someone tall, skinny. He was looking at me." My heart seemed to stop. She had seen it. It wasn't just in my head. That thing existed. "We're leaving now," I screamed, pulling her by the arm. But the bedroom door slammed shut by itself, and the lamp turned off. The darkness was absolute. All you could hear was Sophie's panting and a low sound, like someone was whispering in the corner of the room. "Stay." I didn't think. I kicked the door with all my might and it flew open with a bang. I picked Sophie up and we ran out. I didn't even look back. We ran down the building stairs like hell was behind us, and maybe it was. When we got to the street, Sophie was crying. "Who was that shadow, Mom?" she asked, trembling. I had no answer. I just knew I would never go back to that apartment. We broke the lease, left half our stuff there, and never set foot in the building again. To this day, when I think about that thing, the fear comes back, because we never knew what it wanted. And the worst part? Sometimes, in the silence of the early morning, I still feel like something is out there, waiting for us to slip up, waiting for us to come back. Some hauntings fade away, but others just stick around, waiting for the next door to open, like that shadow that became part of the nightly routine, until the daughter started seeing it too. If you made it to the end, comment, "I saw the last shadow" down below, just so I know who the brave ones are that stick around till the very end. If you like the vibe of these stories, go ahead and subscribe. We always have more real horror experiences coming, and I'd love to have you back for the next one. And hit that like button too. It helps spread these stories to more people who love a good scare before bed. There's a video right here that'll mess with your head too. Click it and keep watching with me. The next story might be closer than you think.